The sun was shining bright as Marcus Walker stepped out of the cab, his worn-out sneakers hitting the pavement with a soft thud. He adjusted the hood of his sweatshirt, looking up at the towering real estate office ahead. The glossy, modern glass building seemed to taunt him, standing tall and imposing against the backdrop of the busy city. Marcus felt the weight of the day's expectations hanging over him. He had seen this office from the outside before, and today he was going to prove something. To them. To himself. As he pushed through the revolving doors, the smell of freshly brewed coffee and polished marble floors hit him. The receptionist looked up lazily, her eyes immediately scanning his appearance, faded jeans, a hoodie, sneakers, and his unkempt hair that seemed out of place in such an upscale setting. A flicker of judgment passed across her face, barely noticeable, but Marcus saw it. "May I help you?" she asked, not bothering to mask her indifference. "I'm here to see Mr. Bradson. I have an appointment," Marcus replied smoothly, trying to keep his voice calm. Her eyes lingered for a moment on his outfit, then flicked back to her computer screen. "Sure," she muttered, tapping a few keys. "Mr. Bradson is busy, but I'll let him know you're here." She didn't even get up. Instead, she motioned toward a set of chairs, directing Marcus to wait. He didn't sit, though. He stood, looking around at the expensive furniture, the sleek modern art hanging on the walls, and the spotless floor that reflected every detail. It felt like the kind of place where people like him didn't belong. Moments later, a sharply dressed man appeared from behind the elevator doors. He was in his late 40s, wearing a well-tailored suit with perfectly shined shoes. His eyes scanned the room, and when they landed on Marcus, there was a flash of doubt, brief but clear. This wasn't the kind of person he expected to walk through the doors. "You Marcus Walker?" the man asked, his tone clipped. Marcus nodded, walking forward. "Yes, I'm here to discuss a property." Bradson, the agent, didn't offer a handshake. Instead, he sized Marcus up. "Come with me," he said, walking briskly past him without waiting for a response. As Marcus followed Bradson through the pristine corridors of the office, he felt his nerves begin to rise. The building reeked of wealth and privilege. He was just here to buy a house. Why did it feel so wrong? Bradson led him to a small, glass-walled conference room. It was modern, with high-end furniture and a large polished table in the center. He motioned for Marcus to sit, but again the lack of courtesy stung. "So," Bradson began, sitting down opposite Marcus. "Looking to buy your first home, I take it?" He didn't sound interested, just transactional, like he was speaking to any regular buyer. Marcus met his gaze. "I'm looking for something that fits my lifestyle," he said carefully, keeping his voice steady. He wasn't here to get into a debate about why he dressed casually, why he didn't look like a typical buyer. He was here for one thing only, a property that matched his needs. Bradson's eyes flicked over Marcus's hoodie and worn sneakers before turning back to the papers in front of him. He didn't bother hiding his skepticism. "Well, we deal with a lot of high-end clients here, people who can afford real luxury, not just something that's functional." Marcus could hear the subtle mockery in Bradson's tone, but he didn't rise to the bait. "I'm interested in something upscale," Marcus replied. "Something with land. Something with space." Bradson raised an eyebrow, clearly unimpressed. "Right. Sure. Let's see what we can find. But I just have to say, the market isn't for everyone. You should probably start with something a little more modest." There was no mistaking it now. The stereotype was clear in Bradson's words. He was making an assumption that Marcus could feel in his gut, that because of the way he dressed, because of the way he looked, he wasn't capable of buying a luxury home. Bradson was on autopilot as he showed Marcus a few properties. None of them were particularly impressive, but he had deliberately chosen homes that were within the lower end of the market. He couldn't imagine that a guy like Marcus would want anything else. "Here's a nice one. It's got 2 bedrooms, a decent backyard," Bradson said, his voice flat. "But I guess you wouldn't mind if it's a bit smaller, right?" Marcus kept his expression neutral as he looked around the small, outdated house. It wasn't what he was looking for at all, but Bradson's tone and attitude, his assumption that this was all Marcus could afford, was starting to get under his skin. "Why don't we look at something else?" Marcus asked, trying to keep his frustration in check. Bradson led him to another property, this one a little bigger but still far below what Marcus had in mind. "The price is right for this one," Bradson said dismissively. "Though I'm guessing it's probably a little out of your league." Marcus clenched his fists. He had had enough of Bradson's assumptions. "I told you I want to see something else. I'm interested in something with a lot more space, with a view." Bradson laughed, clearly mocking him. "A view?" "Look, buddy, I'm trying to help you out here, but this is a bit of a stretch. You sure you're not just wasting my time?" At that moment, Marcus knew what he had to do. But he wasn't going to argue. Instead, he turned and walked out of the house, leaving Bradson standing in the doorway, his jaw hanging open. The following day, Bradson couldn't resist calling Marcus again. He had convinced himself that the man had been just a dreamer, someone who would be easily deterred by the reality of high-end properties. He dialed Marcus's number, a sense of superiority still hanging in the air. When Marcus answered, his voice was calm, but there was an edge to it. "Mr. Bradson, I've decided on a property. I'm interested in the lake house you have listed on the outskirts of town." Bradson for a split second didn't know how to respond. The lake house? It was one of the most expensive properties on their list, the kind of property reserved for millionaires, the kind of property Bradson was sure Marcus couldn't possibly afford. "The lake house?" he asked incredulously. "Are you sure? That's a bit out of your budget, don't you think?" Marcus's voice didn't waver. "I'm sure. Let's schedule a viewing." The day of the viewing, Marcus arrived at the lake house before Bradson, who showed up a few minutes late. As they walked through the grand entrance of the house, Marcus kept his thoughts to himself. The house was more magnificent than he had imagined. The open spaces, the massive windows, the stunning view of the lake. It was everything he wanted and more. Bradson, however, continued his dismissive behavior, walking in front of Marcus like he was showing a child something out of their league. "It's got a great view, but I'm sure it's beyond your price range," he said, barely concealing the sneer in his voice. Marcus stopped in his tracks, his voice calm but firm. "I'm buying this house." Bradson didn't take him seriously. "Come on, Marcus, let's be real here. This is way out of your league." Marcus finally took out his phone, pulling up a document from his investment firm. "You might want to take a look at this," Marcus said, showing Bradson the figures on his screen. It wasn't just a contract. It was the financial documents that showed Marcus's wealth, multi-million-dollar companies, vast holdings in several industries. Bradson's face drained of color as he looked at the screen. His heart began to race. The man he had judged so harshly, so wrongly, was a billionaire. Bradson felt the ground shift beneath him as the realization hit. He had stereotyped Marcus based on his clothes, his demeanor, and his race. He had assumed this man couldn't possibly afford the home he was showing him, and in doing so, he had ruined everything. Marcus didn't give Bradson a chance to apologize. Instead, he turned and walked out of the house, leaving Bradson standing alone in the foyer, his thoughts spinning. Later that day, Marcus called Bradson's boss. He made sure to include every detail of his experience, how he had been treated, how Bradson had dismissed him purely based on appearance. He didn't demand anything, just that Bradson be held accountable for his actions. By the time Bradson's boss called him into the office, it was too late. The damage had been done. Complaints had already flooded in about Bradson's behavior, including Marcus's. Bradson was reprimanded and given a warning. But it was clear, his actions had cost him dearly. His career now hung by a thread. Bradson's punishment was severe. He was temporarily suspended while the company evaluated whether or not to keep him on staff. The customers he had alienated, especially Marcus, were a powerful reminder that biases could destroy careers. Marcus, on the other hand, moved into his new home, a testament to his success, his perseverance, and the reminder that no one should ever be judged based on appearances. Bradson had learned his lesson too late.